Audiobook Academy. Book Summary. The Man in the Iron Mask. By Alexandre Dumas. Alexandre Dumas, The Vicomte of Bragelonne, 10 years later trilogy includes The Man in the Iron Mask, or as it is called in the original French, Le Vicomte de Bragelonne ou Dixons plus tard. Between 1847 and 1850, a serialized version of the 268-chapter novel was published. Following The Three Musketeers and 20 years after, The Vicomte is the concluding novel in the D'Artagnan romance series. Louise de la Vallière and Louise de Bragelonne follow in The Vicomte, the second 2 volumes. These 3 books are about equal in length to the first volume of The Three Musketeers. The plot revolves around the Three Musketeers once again. Louis XIV's rise to the throne of France is the subject of the entire book, which takes place between 1660 and 1667. The guy with the iron mask, the titular character, is said to represent Louis XIV's twin brother, who was imprisoned by his parents and had his identity covered by an iron mask. Aramis, the musketeer's ex-girlfriend, is the only one who knows about Philippe, the twin son of the Duchesse de Chevreuse. He devises a plot to replace Louis with Philippe so that he can use Philippe as his puppet king, a ruler who is more vulnerable. Aramis will have to pay the price of his greed when his scheme goes horribly wrong. A man named Baisemeaux and another man, Aramis, walk to a prison cell in the Bastille, France's most famous and largest prison. According to Baisemeaux's recollections, he and Aramis used to be close friends until Aramis was elevated above him in the organization. In a prison cell, Aramis is to hear a prisoner's confession from Baisemeaux. Convicted of murder, the prisoner claims that he does not wish to confess. It is revealed that Aramis and the young guy have met before and that he was a former musketeer for the king. Having admitted that he has no idea why he is in prison, the young man shares a story from his childhood with Aramis. He alleges that he was kept under house arrest as a child and that he was misled about the identities of his parents. He's aware that his father is no longer with him, but that his mother is. The detainee inquires of Aramis whether or not revealing his identity to the public will result in a major scandal. Certainly, Aramis says. When Aramis finishes, he tells him all about the French kings. Until recently, France was ruled by King Louis XIII, a weak monarch who was easily manipulated by Cardinal Richelieu. The king's wife, Anne of Austria, gave birth to twins while they were married. Louis XIII was replaced by Louis XIV soon after. It is Aramis' request that the young prisoner examine his own face in comparison to the portrait of the current monarch that he receives from him. The young man is taken aback by the striking resemblances between the 2 examples. His father, King Louis VII of France, is his father's son, and Aramis seeks to place him on the French throne. Prisoner, on the other hand, is adamant that he will not be released. To show his appreciation, Aramis kisses the young man on the cheek as he departs. The following day, Aramis pays a visit to D'Artagnan, a friend and former musketeer. In this scene, D'Artagnan is getting a suit tailored. During the fitting, Aramis tells the tailor that the king's superintendent of finances, Nicolas Fouquet, plans to present the king with a portrait of himself on the day of the fete, and he wants to know what he will be wearing so that they can match the clothes in the portrait to his actual regal attire. He requests swatches of the fabrics used in the suits. D'Artagnan feels on edge after hearing this talk. The enigmatic Aramis departs to meet with Fouquet on his own initiative. Asked for a letter to be sent to Monsieur de Lyon, appealing for the release of Seldon, he tells the guy how the portrait idea is progressing. Baisemeaux soon receives the order to free Seldon, but Aramis cleverly switches the orders such that the young man at the beginning of the story is the one who is released. Philippe Marchal is the young man's name. As they leave the prison, Aramis tells Philippe more about his identity and the circumstances surrounding his imprisonment. To make things right, Aramis suggests to Philippe that as the present king's twin, he just take the king's position. He is reluctant to consent since he is unsure of his desire to rule. In the end, he agrees, but only after Aramis has explained what he expects in exchange. Confirming his desire for the throne of St. Peter, Aramis informs him of his plans for becoming pope or a candidate for the position. Philippe is on board with this sentiment. When we return to Vaux, Fouquet is busy making final preparations for the arrival of the king. Aramis comes at the king's palace and examines the portrait that will be given to him. Both he and Fouquet think it's ideal. Aramis departs to change his clothes as the men learn that the king's warriors are closing in. We learn that Porthos, another former musketeer, is staying just next door to him in one of the rooms directly above the king's. When the monarch finally shows up, there is a huge celebration. He approaches Aramis in the evening and tries to quiz him about his concerns about Fouquet's reasons for holding the fete. He fails. At first, Aramis is suspicious of D'Artagnan, but when the two men swear on their friendship that they are not scheming together against the king, D'Artagnan is convinced. D'Artagnan is pleased, while Aramis is troubled by his betrayal of D'Artagnan. In the absence of D'Artagnan, Philippe is free to emerge from hiding. Despite D'Artagnan's steadfast devotion to the monarch, Aramis assures Philippe that if he learns of the switch, he will keep his mouth quiet out of respect for the Gascons' national pride. A floorboard is then raised by the men, allowing them access to see into the room below where the king is resting. A member of the king's inner circle, Colbert, is in the room. He confronts Colbert about how Fouquet was able to afford such an extravagant bash. Colbert reveals to Fouquet that the $13 million in government funds he got were never refunded to him, according to Colbert. The king is taken aback, but he decides to put off making a decision about Fouquet until the next day. Aramis intervenes to prevent Philippe from reinstalling the floorboards after the king removes Colbert. Philippe is told to pay attention to the king's regular bedtime rituals. Fouquet will be arrested the following morning, but King Louis XIII has made plans for the next day. Armed and disguised guys led him out of his room the following morning. Are Aramis and Porthos, the two masked assailants? When they arrive, Aramis apologizes to Baisemeaux and admits that they had released the wrong prisoner. Marshal was mistakenly released as a result of their efforts to free Seldon. His first step after fleeing was to declare that he is the King of France, and now that he has returned, it appears that he intends to restore him back to power. His brother's old cell is now the king's prison cell. Philippe returns to Vaux and begins to adapt to his new role as king. Aramis confesses to Fouquet nearby and the latter is outraged that such a ruse occurred under his roof, as are the rest of the people present. Aramis is told by Fouquet to leave the land and to bring Porthos with him to his fortress, Belle-Isle, where he might seek refuge. Fouquet rushes to the Bastille to release the monarch, but he is apprehended by the unprepared Baisemeaux and imprisoned with the king. It's no wonder the king feels that Fouquet intends to assassinate him. In order to liberate him, Fouquet tells the king that he's coming to tell him of the conspiracy against him and the installation of his identical brother on the throne. This shocks the monarch, who didn't know that he had a brother. He says he plans to kill Aramis, Porthos, and his own brother as well. A royal-blooded person cannot be executed, says Fouquet, in an attempt to sway him from his decision. But the monarch rejects his request for a pardon for Aramis and Porthos. After they've all left the prison, Baisemeaux is left to his own devices. Even if he doesn't hear from Aramis, Philippe pretends to be king throughout the day in Vaux, worrying about Aramis' whereabouts. His mother, Anne of Austria, eventually meets him. Philippe defies his mother's pleas to arrest Fouquet. Louis, the rightful king, will soon return. Everyone in the room, with the exception of Anne, is taken aback by the sight of her two sons huddled together in such close quarters. D'Artagnan is instructed by Louis to detain Philippe. When Philippe is taken into custody, he tries to shame his mother and brother for their actions. D'Artagnan is ordered by Colbert to put an iron mask on Philippe's head and transfer him to the island prison of Sainte Marguerite. D'Artagnan tells Fouquet that Philippe would have been a greater monarch than Louis if he had been in power. In a frantic bid to flee from Vaux, Aramis and Porthos ride all night and all day to get out of town. They keep switching horses until they reach a waypoint where there are no more new horses to be found. The only last musketeer, Athos, lives nearby. Aramis is about to give up hope when he remembers this. Raoul and his father, Athos, have a quiet existence. Arriving at his door, Aramis and Porthos inquire as to whether they may speak with him. Athos learns about the coup d'état from Aramis, who informs him of the plot. To save the plot, Aramis suggests using his allies in Spain. Aramis and Porthos go on their own after he asks Athos if he wants to join them. This may be the final time they see each other, according to Athos. D'Artagnan's whereabouts in Sainte Marguerite are the focus of Athos and Raoul's search. Silver dinnerware falls to their feet as they walk toward the garrison. They hear someone shouting as they approach. As it turns out, Philippe left a message on the plate. As soon as they've had a chance to respond, someone fires at them. Shooters are halted by D'Artagnan, who emerges and tells them to stop. In a flash, he informs Athos and Raoul that they must appear to be Spanish in order to avoid being killed by the castle's governor for reading the text on the plate. D'Artagnan informs the governor that the two men are Spanish naval captains and erases the plate's inscription. Athos reveals to D'Artagnan that he is aware of the king's assassination plot when the two are alone. D'Artagnan is alarmed and concerned for the safety of his companions as a result of this. The prisoner is revealed to Athos for the first time as they go around the fort. The prisoner, who is wearing an iron mask, cries and yells as he demands to be called accursed. When D'Artagnan returns to Paris, he finds that he has received an instruction from the king. This time he's leaving with Athos and Raoul by his side. They must go back to their own lives, however. As he says his final goodbyes, D'Artagnan hugs them both tight. D'Artagnan's first task upon returning to Paris is to collect the money owed to the government by Fouquet. Fouquet is virtually bankrupt once he does this. After a few days, D'Artagnan receives another order to arrest Fouquet, but the man escapes on a white horse. D'Artagnan is hot on his tail, brandishing a pistol, and yelling at him to drop the gun. However, D'Artagnan refuses to shoot Fouquet. D'Artagnan's horse begins to slip and fall as the pursuit picks up speed. A fall from his horse has left D'Artagnan with a fractured leg, but he still has time to grasp hold of Fouquet's leg and pursue him on foot. D'Artagnan, on the other hand, falls unconscious quite quickly. He is glad for Fouquet's honor in not killing him while he was unconscious when he wakes up to see the man standing over him, and he thanks him for that. The two men will have to go back to the town. D'Artagnan is instructed to deliver the message Saint-Mandé to either Madame Belair or Pelisson. D'Artagnan is ordered to bring 20 of his best soldiers to Belle Isle by the king, who has discovered where Aramis and Porthos are camped up. It becomes clear to D'Artagnan that he must find a peaceful solution to this without causing any harm to two of his closest friends. Aramis and Porthos are chatting on Belle Isle when they spot a large group of ships in the distance. At nightfall, a guy emerges from a tiny boat that lands on the island. Letter from D'Artagnan explains that the king has ordered him to catch them on this island. D'Artagnan invites the two men to come out and meet him when he has a chance. Aramis, on the other hand, instructs the person bringing the letter to have D'Artagnan come out to the island in its place as an alternative. D'Artagnan follows the king's orders and is accompanied by a naval commander. After telling the officer he desires to speak with his friends in private, D'Artagnan drew his sword on him when the officer rebuffed him. The cop finally gives in and steps back. After embracing one another, the three buddies set about figuring out how to get themselves out of their current predicament. Aramis wonders if they should stay and fend off the soldiers, or if they should retreat. In response, he advises that D'Artagnan return Porthos to the king and swear that he had nothing to do with the conspiracy. D'Artagnan gets an idea from this and whispers it to Aramis, who is surprised. D'Artagnan returns to his ship after Aramis has given his blessing to the scheme. When he returns, he finds an order from the king forbidding Aramis and Porthos from being permitted to board the ship for free deliberation. Disguised as acceptance of the order, D'Artagnan is enraged within. Resigning and returning to France are the orders of the day for the fleet. In his mind, this will allow him and his pals more time to flee the island. Upon refusing the order and making an attempt at resignation, his soldiers inform him that they have been given orders to arrest him. As a result of D'Artagnan's surrender, the blockade is lifted and France is once again free to trade. Aramis returns to the island and informs Porthos of D'Artagnan's unsuccessful scheme, which the latter is unaware of. It's then that he recommends Porthos as the only one who can get away in the nick of time. It's either Porthos or nothing, he says, and he's right. As a result, Porthos informs Aramis that he's been feeling weak recently and believes that he's going to die at any moment. Another fleet appears out of nowhere. Porthos and Aramis engage in a scuffle before capturing a prisoner and questioning him. The prisoner's father, Biscarat, was one of the swordsmen who assaulted and fought the musketeers on the day they met D'Artagnan, and it turns out that the prisoner is his son. The stranger is welcomed by Aramis and Porthos, and they begin to regard him as a friend. As the night progresses, Aramis becomes aware that a second wave of soldiers is on its way. Aramis frees Biscarat, and the two flee to Loc Maria in the hope of finding a way out. Legs feel weak when they enter Loc Maria Porthos grotto. Aramis had prepared a canoe for their escape, but the soldiers quickly tracked them into the cave. More soldiers are dispatched, and when they discover that only two men are defending themselves and evading capture so efficiently, they are shocked. During the third wave, Aramis urges Porthos to use a barrel of gunpowder as a bomb in order to kill them and allow the two men to escape amid the commotion. Aramis steers the boat as Porthos sets the barrel alight with a fuse. He manages to do so, but his legs give out just in time, and he is sucked into the blast. Aramis tries to help him, but he is already too late. Large granite boulders released in the explosion crush Porthos to death, killing him. Aramis is so distraught that he is unable to stand on his own 2 feet. After helping him get into his boat, 3 servants start to row him across the Atlantic Ocean to Spain. Captured and surrendered before they can reach their destination. The crew of the ship intends to spare the lives of the servants, but will put an end to Aramis. Aramis, on the other hand, demonstrates his credentials as a former musketeer and Jesuit general, and the ship's captain immediately submits to his authority. His head resting against a ship's rail, Aramis spends the night and morning. D'Artagnan returns to France and approaches the monarch, but is ignored. He loses his title but isn't taken into custody, which he takes as a sign of relief. Prior to leaving for Belle Isle, the King of France asks for a private meeting with him. On his way to the king, they ask him about his instructions for Belle Isle and why he wasn't there to see them executed. A disgruntled D'Artagnan complains that he was not given the full scope of the mission. According to the king, he only delivered directives to individuals he considered loyal. As someone who has always considered himself a loyal servant of the king, D'Artagnan finds this deeply upsetting. D'Artagnan contends that this time the king's opponents were his own 2 best friends, and the monarch claims that he failed to combat the enemy. In the end, the monarch tells him that he has failed his loyalty test. The king is informed by a messenger that at Belle Isle, he has lost 110 soldiers. Secretly, D'Artagnan is relieved that his companions appear to have escaped. Once Aramis and Porthos have been pardoned, D'Artagnan finally gives in. King Louis XIII accepts, and D'Artagnan heads back to Belle Isle. In the absence of Aramis, he learns that Porthos was murdered. Once again, he returns to find the king already aware of what he had told him. In response to D'Artagnan's question about why he wasn't informed, the king discloses that he read a letter from Aramis. He gives D'Artagnan the go-ahead to bury Porthos where he wants him to be. D'Artagnan learns at Porthos' funeral that he has left D'Artagnan his whole estate, including a pension for Aramis. That Mustin, Raoul's male servant, should be present as well. When Athos returns to his mansion and learns of Porthos' death, he collapses in shock and exhaustion. He soon learns that his son, Raoul, was killed in Africa while serving in the military. Athos' shock at the sudden deaths of 2 significant individuals in his life causes his death. When D'Artagnan returns a short time later, he discovers the body of his companion and collapses in sorrow. At least D'Artagnan is delighted that Athos and his son are united in paradise, when he gathers his thoughts. However, even as he prepares for Athos' final farewell on Athos' estate, he wonders aloud if he would be the one to pass. A final farewell is said, and he heads back to Paris. Beginning 4 years later, the book's epilogue is under progress. D'Artagnan has become a count. Fouquet is currently behind bars. On what used to be Athos' territory, the king is hosting a hunting party. When D'Artagnan hears that the Duc d'Almeida, or rather, his old buddy Aramis, will be attending the celebration, he immediately jumps into action. Hug and private talk for the 2 men. The 2 remaining musketeers visit the tombs of Athos and Raoul. England and the King of Spain are joining forces so that Spain can go to war with Holland. For his bravery and leadership, D'Artagnan says he expects to be given the marshal's baton when they arrive in Holland. After that, we're brought to Holland, where ships carrying immigrants from the United Kingdom and France are docked. As long as Aramis is in charge, they may be comfortable that Spain will remain neutral in the conflict. With the help of his troops, D'Artagnan has conquered a number of fortifications. Following D'Artagnan's triumph, the king sends an ambassador to Holland to officially install him as a marshal. D'Artagnan, despite the fact that he is in the midst of an attack, opens the messenger's small but heavy chest. A cannonball strikes him in the chest as he turns to open it. His final utterances are, "There will be no more encounters between us, Athos and Porthos. Aramis, goodbye for all time." As the story comes to an end, the narrator observes that just one of the original 4 musketeers is left. D'Artagnan is a former musketeer and current captain of the musketeers. He has a strong sense of honor and courage, and he's also a superb fighter. In the first book of the series, D'Artagnan meets the 3 musketeers as he travels to Paris to learn the trade and ends up assisting them in a battle. All but D'Artagnan are dead by the time the novel finishes. He's been working for the king for a long time now. When asked to arrest his companions Aramis and Porthos in The Man in the Iron Mask, he must prove his allegiance to the king in France. D'Artagnan cares deeply about and is intimately familiar with his closest companions. Despite his early suspicions, he only promises to save Aramis rather than have him arrested when he understands the entire scope of the conspiracy. At Belle Isle, He keeps a commitment he made 30 chapters before. D'Artagnan is possibly the most indisputably virtuous character in the book, and he always puts his friends first. Aramis. This book's comment about Aramis sums him up best. It is said that Aramis used the good things in this life to get to the terrible ones, as a soldier and a priest as well as a diplomat. To brighten his own light, he never harmed anyone for the sake of doing good deeds. He was generous, even if he was not noble in spirit. For additional information, please see the following link. Aramis is the most enigmatic figure in the entire series, not just in the novel. As an instigator, he's generally the one to come up with the most creative ideas for the Musketeers' missions, both successful and unsuccessful. In The Man in the Iron Mask, Aramis' quest for France's supremacy often interferes with his relationships with friends and allies. After confessing his intention to Fouquet, Aramis seems to regret it shortly, coldly allowing Philippe to fall into the hands of the monarch, or lack thereof. So it's impossible to tell if he had any real interest in the concept in the first place, given this. In spite of this, Aramis does appear to be a true musketeer till the end. When Porthos is killed, he is claimed to shed a tear for the first time in his life, agreeing to be arrested on Belle Isle in exchange for his release. At the end of the novel, Aramis is the sole surviving musketeer. Porthos is one of the original musketeers and is most known for being a gentle giant. Unless he is engaged in combat, in which case he unleashes his incredible might on his foes. His best friend and protector Porthos is killed while attempting to save Aramis in this series. When Aramis proposes to topple the monarchy, he readily agrees, but at Belle Isle, he has second thoughts about fighting the soldiers because of the moral ramifications. The scene in which Porthos dies is one of the most moving in the novel, and despite the fact that he was a man of few words, his friends will miss him. Athos. Before the start of the novel, Athos has moved away to live with his adult son. As a result, he plays a smaller role in the story and has less interactions with the central plot. It is revealed at some point before to the beginning of the narrative that Athos has left the Musketeers and has gone back to his estate before any of his friends. The bulk of Athos' story revolves around him preparing for his son Raoul's deployment to Africa. As though foreseeing his son's death in battle, he kills himself not long afterward, convinced that life is meaningless without him by his side. Philippe, also known as the guy with the iron mask, is revealed to be the twin brother of the son who was imprisoned as a child in order to avoid posing a threat to the king's throne at the beginning of the narrative. Not much is known about why he was picked as the son to be imprisoned. A pawn for most of Philippe's life in his brother's monarchy, he is later utilized by Aramis in his game to acquire further control over France. As he was by his parents, he was abandoned once more. Philippe, then, is a tragic figure. Philippe, the protagonist of the tale, is only briefly referred to as the king in a few passages. Until D'Artagnan departs his island jail, where he's forced to wear an identity mask, we don't know what happened to the young prince in those years that elapsed. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button for more content like this. See you in next video.